What's up, sports fans? I want to go ahead and walk you through the annotated bibliography prompt. So, as mentioned in my most recent announcement, Wednesday's announcement, the annotated bibliography is a part of Major Essay Project 2, but it does have a separate prompt because I think it's a little bit more manageable when we break it apart that way. So let's go ahead and click on the little link here in the module. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open it in Google Docs. Make this a little bigger. Okay. No, I don't want to take a survey right now. So before I read the prompt, I want to just talk a little bit about what an annotated bibliography is. So I'm aware that most of you probably haven't heard of what this is, or at least maybe you've heard of it, but you've never done an annotated bibliography. So don't worry if that's the case. We'll go ahead and walk you through. You're going to do one by the end of this summer session. Okay, so let's break the word or the phrase annotated bibliography apart. Let's start with annotated. So as we know, to annotate, the verb to annotate means to take notes on, right? So when we annotate a text, we are underlining things that stand out to us as interesting, important, or confusing. We're jotting things down in the margins, so if we notice a connection to another text or idea we've encountered, we might jot that down in the margin so that we are reminded of that when we go back to the text. We might write down questions, so if something sparks a question in our minds, we want to jot that question down so that maybe we can follow up on that later. Or just even little notations that just point to important key details in the text. So it's active reading. That's one of the features of active reading, is to annotate something, right? To take notes on it. Now, bibliography, let's break this word apart. So the first part of this word is bibli or biblio, and those of you who speak Spanish might recognize that as book, right? So biblio, biblioteca, that's the word for library in Spanish. That's where the word Bible comes from, right? So Bible, book. Ography or graphy, that comes from ancient Greek, and essentially that just means to write. So bibliography, when we put these words together, or put those two kind of base words together, writing about books. Now, an annotated bibliography means that we are taking notes on something we've written about books. So let's go ahead and get into this, and hopefully that will make a little bit more sense as we go through. An important component of a research project is the annotated bibliography. Annotated bibliographies challenge us to read and assess our sources critically, evaluating both their content and merit. Additionally, because the research process takes considerable time and effort, annotated bibliographies can help keep us on track with our research timeline. Because this project is designed to help us gather resources for Major Essay Project number 2, the sources you include in your annotated bibliography should all center on a single topic or issue. So this is a really important thing to keep in mind. The annotated bibliography, this project, is meant to help you with the research that you're doing for Major Essay Project 2. So that means the topic that you're focusing on in your annotated bibliography is the same exact topic you're focusing on in Major Essay Project 2. Okay, so that's really important to keep in mind. So, there are a few different components that go into creating an annotated bibliography entry. So the word entry is what we use for the annotation for one single source. So we're going to have a few different entries, 3 in total, but each entry is going to address these components here. So let me break these down. So the first component is the correct and complete bibliographic information for your source, formatted according to MLA guidelines, just as it would look on a regular works cited page. So the first component it's going to be all the publication information that for that particular source, just as it would look on a properly formatted works cited page. Okay, so you're going to use the MLA guidelines to determine how does that source, or how should that source be cited. That's going to be the first component. The second component is a brief summary of the source, at least 5 to 7 sentences, wherein the writer details what the source contains, explains what its argument and supporting points are, or offers a description of the source if it does not have an explicit argument. For example, if it's a research report or piece of research data, it may not have an explicit argument. So this is important to keep in mind. So the second component is a brief summary of the source itself. So in many cases, the source will have some kind of argument. The author is trying to express a point of view, and they support that point of view with the various points of evidence that they include. So you would just give a brief summary of what that argument is, so what that point of view is, and how that writer supports that point of view. Now, if it's just a piece of research data, for example, it's just a document or description of an experiment that a group of researchers conducted, and then it just provides the results of the experiment. In that case, there's not going to be an explicit argument. So what you would do is just describe what the experiment was and the results that the researchers found from the experiment. Or if it's something that documents statistics, you would just explain or detail what those statistics are. So a description of the source if it doesn't have an explicit argument or point of view. The third component is an assessment or evaluation of the source's quality, at least 3 to 5 sentences. How valuable is the source? So you're going to want to explain that. And does the source have limitations? In some instances, you might find that the source doesn't address something that you think is important to the research or important to the argument. So you might point that out. Not always, but that might be the case. But definitely you're going to talk about what within that source has value and why it's valuable to your research, or why it's valuable to the success of the source. Now, in most cases, I would say 9 times out of 10, you're going to think that the source is valuable. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be using it in your research if you didn't think it was valuable, right? So in this case, you're just going to explain why it's valuable, or what about it is valuable and why. What does the writer do really well, in other words? And then the fourth component is a brief but detailed explanation of how the source will fit into your research project. And this is at least 2 to 3 sentences. How will it relate to your other sources? How do you plan to use it in your project? Or what might it add to your exploration? So this is an indication of how the source will fit into your bigger, broader research project, right? So in many cases, you may not necessarily know exactly how you plan to use the source, but you might have an idea, right? So you would just give an indication of that idea. I think I might use this source because of A, B, or C. Or you might point out how it connects to another source. This source relates to this other source because of X, Y, or Z. So that's just what you're doing in that fourth component. You're giving a brief indication of how you think that source will fit into your broader research project. So in total, you will provide annotations for 3 sources, 2 of which must come from the library databases. Now, in the video for Major Essay Project 2, I mentioned that I'm going to be helping you guys understand how to use the library databases, so I'm going to post some explanation videos soon that will walk you through how to access the databases, how to use those databases effectively to make sure that you actually understand how to do that. So in total, you're going to have 3 sources in your annotated bibliography, but 2 of them need to come from the library databases, okay? Each annotation or entry, so remember an entry is what another way we refer to an annotation in this particular aspect, and each entry addresses these 4 components. So each entry should be at least 250 words in length. So to address these concerns, it will be at least 250 words in length for each entry. MLA guidelines apply, however, you do not need to double space your annotated bibliography. I just find it's a little bit neater that way. It saves some space. We don't need to double space the annotated bibliography. Everything else that you do in MLA format, you would double space, but for this particular project, we don't need to do that. So the first entry is due Thursday, the 16th of July, and that will be through Canvas, of course, by midnight. The second and third entries are due a couple days later on Sunday, the 19th of July, through Canvas by midnight. Now, I'm going to suggest that you try your best to find your sources before the end of Thursday, the 16th, just so that when you're working on the second and third entries, you're not left scrambling over that weekend to try to get them done. It would just be a matter of composing the annotations or the entries for those sources. So set yourself up for success. Put in the work ahead of time. Don't put it off until the end. I'm going to go ahead and show you an example that I created, but I'm going to end this video and show you in a different video. All right, well, stay tuned.